My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm 48 years old, and I'm an archivist for the Regional Historical Society. My life is built on preserving the past, on understanding the delicate threads that connect us to what came before. So, when I pulled up to my childhood home that Saturday morning, the sight of my mother's antique oak chest, splintered and half buried under a pile of paint cans in the garage, hit me like a physical blow. Brenda, my cousin Mark's wife, stood by the open garage door, wiping her hands on her jeans, a self-satisfied smirk playing on her lips. "Morning, Sarah. Just doing some much-needed spring cleaning for Dad. Your old junk was really taking up valuable space." She gestured dismissively at the chaotic heap of boxes, furniture, and loose items, many clearly damaged. My mother's delicate porcelain teacups, once carefully wrapped, lay exposed, one with a broken handle. A framed photo of my mother and me, taken years ago, was face down, the glass shattered. I felt a cold, quiet fury tighten in my chest, a sensation so intense it almost took my breath away. Brenda thought she was being helpful, or perhaps, simply asserting her dominance. What she didn't understand yet was that she hadn't just thrown out my junk, she'd carelessly discarded pieces of history, of memory, and in doing so, she had just opened a door she would instantly regret walking through. This wasn't just about clutter, it was about erasure, and I wouldn't let it stand. To understand why Brenda felt she had the right to do this, you need to know a bit about my family. I'm an only child. My mother, Eleanor, passed away 5 years ago after a long illness. My father, Robert, now 75, is a kind, gentle man, but he's always been a bit too agreeable, too inclined to avoid conflict. He loved my mother deeply, and her passing left a void he never quite filled. After Mom died, I spent weeks carefully packing away her cherished belongings, family photo albums, my own childhood keepsakes, and some antique furniture she'd inherited. These items were placed in my old bedroom, which had always been called Sarah's room, even after I moved out for college decades ago. It was understood that one day, when I had a bigger house, I would take them. My father lived alone for 4 years, managing fairly well, though he started to slow down. Then, about a year ago, my cousin Mark and his wife, Brenda, had a crisis. Their house, they claimed, had severe foundation issues, making it temporarily uninhabitable. They pitched the idea of moving in with Dad, ostensibly to help him out. "He shouldn't be alone, Sarah," Brenda had told me over the phone, her voice dripping with concern. "We can keep an eye on him, cook for him, make sure he takes his meds." Dad, ever the peacemaker, agreed. He truly believed they were helping. I had my reservations, but I lived 2 hours away, and I couldn't be there every day. It seemed like a reasonable solution at the time. The first subtle shift happened within a month of their arrival. Brenda, always a whirlwind of activity, started reorganizing the house. My old room, once a sanctuary of memories, was rebranded the guest room. "We need the space for when Mark's sister comes to visit," Brenda explained, even though Mark's sister lived across town and rarely stayed overnight. My carefully stacked boxes were moved into the closet, out of sight. I felt a pang of unease, but I told myself it was just Brenda's way, and at least my things were still there. I didn't want to cause friction for Dad. My mother's antique wooden box, intricately carved with small birds, was in one of those boxes, holding her most treasured letters. I remember thinking how glad I was that it was safe. Then came the financial help. Brenda, a former bookkeeper, offered to manage Dad's bills. "He's getting a bit forgetful with all the paperwork," she'd said. Dad, who had always been meticulous with his finances, seemed to accept this, too. He was tired, he told me. Soon, I started noticing unusual purchases on his bank statements when I'd review them online. He'd given me access years ago for emergencies. There were expensive new gadgets, a huge smart TV Dad didn't need, a high-end coffee machine he never used, and new furniture that didn't quite fit his taste or comfort. When I asked Brenda about it, she'd wave her hand dismissively. "Oh, Dad just needed a bit of fun. He deserves to treat himself." She always had an answer, a plausible-sounding excuse that made me feel like I was being overly suspicious. The isolation began subtly. My calls to Dad were increasingly intercepted by Brenda. "Dad's resting," she'd say. "He's out with Mark. We're busy with an appointment." My visits became harder to arrange. When I did manage to see him, he seemed a little more subdued, less engaged. He'd often look to Brenda before answering a question, a habit I found deeply unsettling. It was like a slow, creeping fog, obscuring my father from me. I tried tea. Oh, talk to him about it, but he'd just sigh. "Brenda means well, honey. She's just trying to help." The clear-out demand was the most direct confrontation before the garage incident. A few weeks prior, Brenda had called me. "Sarah, your old junk really needs to go. We need to make space for Dad's new hobbies," she'd said, her voice strained with impatience. "He wants a dedicated space for his model airplanes." Dad had never shown an interest in model airplanes. I promised I would come the next weekend to sort through everything, explaining that these were cherished family items, not just junk. Brenda had grumbled but agreed. I thought that was the worst of it. It wasn't. She had clearly decided to take matters into her own hands. Standing in that garage, looking at the wreckage of my past, it all clicked into place. This wasn't about helping Dad or making space. This was about Brenda systematically erasing my presence from the house, isolating my father, and claiming his home, and his assets, for herself and Mark. The broken photo, the splintered hope chest, the haphazard pile of boxes, all screamed a deliberate disrespect, a calculated move to show me who was in charge now. My father's agreeableness had become a weakness she was exploiting, and my patience had become her permission. I realized then that my role as an archivist wasn't just a job, it was a way of seeing the world, a meticulous attention to detail that now served a far more personal purpose. I left the garage that day without saying another word to Brenda, my hands clenched. I drove home, my mind racing. The archivist in me immediately started building a case. I began documenting everything. First, I discreetly checked public records for my father's property deed. It was, as expected, solely in his name. I printed a copy. Then, I contacted a financial advisor friend, ostensibly for general advice on elder care, but specifically asking about red flags for financial exploitation. She gave me a clear list of things to look for. I cross-referenced this with Dad's bank statements, noting every unusual purchase, every withdrawal that didn't align with his usual spending habits. I started keeping a detailed log of my calls and visits, noting Brenda's excuses and my father's increasingly distant demeanor. I took more photos of the garage mess, zooming in on the broken items, the shattered glass, the water stains on the boxes. I even spoke to Mrs. Henderson, Dad's longtime next-door neighbor, who confirmed my suspicions. "Your dad seems awfully quiet these days, Sarah," she'd whispered over the fence. "And Brenda, well, she doesn't like him talking to anyone much." Every piece of information was a thread, weaving a tapestry of manipulation. The most important piece, though, was the antique wooden box. It wasn't among the jumbled mess I could see. A week later, I returned to my father's house. Brenda was in the kitchen, humming cheerfully, oblivious. "Oh, Sarah. Back for more of your treasures, are we?" she chirped, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. "Mark and I are heading out for lunch, so you'll have the house to yourself." I looked her directly in the eye. "Actually, Brenda, I came to talk to you and Dad." Her smile faltered slightly. I led my father and Brenda into the living room. Dad looked uncomfortable, sensing the tension. I started calmly, "Dad, Brenda, I've been reviewing your financial statements, Dad. And I've noticed quite a few discrepancies." I placed printouts of the bank statements on the coffee table, highlighting the unusual purchases. Brenda immediately bristled. "Sarah, what are you talking about?" "I'm just helping your father manage his money. He asked me to." "Did you, Dad?" I asked, turning to him. He looked down at his hands, silent. "And these items," I continued, pointing to a new, expensive espresso machine on the counter. "Dad doesn't drink espresso. These new living room chairs, they're not comfortable for him. And the smart TV, he struggles with the remote. My voice was steady, but inside, I was shaking. Then I shifted. And then there's the garage. I pulled out my phone and displayed the photos of the damaged items, the shattered picture frame, the hope chest. You told me you needed to make space, Brenda, but this looks more like deliberate destruction. These aren't just old junk. This is my mother's legacy, my childhood memories. And my father's property. I then laid the copy of the property deed on the table. This house, Brenda, belongs to Robert Jenkins. Not to you. And I am his only heir. Brenda's face, which had been turning progressively redder, now went utterly pale. The smugness vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer terror. Her eyes darted from the bank statements to the property deed, then to my unyielding gaze. She stammered, I was just trying to help. Mark said we needed the space. He said your dad wanted to clear out the clutter. She tried to blame Mark, but her voice was thin and reedy. The realization of the legal implications, the potential for elder abuse charges, the clear evidence of her disrespect for my family's history, it all hit her at once. She understood, in that moment, that she had gone too far. What you did, Brenda, I said, my voice dropping, was disrespectful, dishonest, and frankly, bordering on illegal. I've already spoken to a lawyer about elder financial abuse and property rights. I didn't have a lawyer on retainer yet, but I had consulted one for advice. I want you and Mark out of this house in 2 weeks. If you're not gone, I will be back with legal aid. And one more thing, where is my mother's antique wooden box? The one with the carved birds? My father, who had been listening in stunned silence, finally looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and sorrow. Brenda, is this true? He whispered, his voice cracking. Brenda burst into tears, denying everything, but it was too late. The damage was done. Brenda and Mark argued furiously that night. 2 days later, Mark called me, his voice tight with anger and resignation. We'll be out by the end of the week, Sarah, he said, not even trying to hide his resentment. Happy now? I told him I would be happy when my father was safe and his home was his again. They packed quickly, their departure marked by slammed doors and terse goodbyes. Brenda avoided my gaze entirely, her face drawn and haggard, a stark contrast to her earlier self-assurance. She had instantly regretted her actions, and the consequences were now very real. After they left, I sat down with my dad. He was heartbroken, apologizing repeatedly for letting things get so out of hand. I assured him it wasn't his fault, that Brenda had taken advantage of his trusting nature. We worked together to get his finances back in order, setting up a new, joint account that I could monitor, and arranging for a trusted local bookkeeper to help him with his bills. I started visiting more often, and slowly, the fog lifted from my father. He began to perk up, his old spark returning. The antique wooden box, slightly scuffed but intact, was found tucked away in a dark corner of the garage, hidden under a tarp, as if Brenda had tried to conceal it after her initial rampage. I carefully cleaned it, polishing the intricate carvings until the bird seemed to take flight. Dad and I spent weeks going through the boxes together, sorting through my mother's things, sharing stories, laughing, and sometimes crying. We rediscovered old letters, faded photographs, and forgotten trinkets. The hope chest, though still splintered, became a project for us, a symbol of rebuilding. Now, the restored antique wooden box sits on the mantelpiece in the living room, a quiet testament to memory, resilience, and the power of standing firm. It's no longer threatened, no longer hidden. It's a reminder that some things are worth fighting for, not just to preserve the past, but to secure the future.